Life, culture, and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 with Neil Johnson on Vision.
Christmas is getting closer, and some of our families will have an Advent calendar counting down to Christmas. It's known as the festive season, but we know that festive in our secularised communities often looks far different to celebrations of the birth of Christ. It is still the case that in the Christmas season, Jesus is the reason for the season. And it is perhaps more important than ever to pass on peace on earth and goodwill to our families and to our communities. Well, Stu Millar is the founder of Train to Proclaim. Joining us once again. Stu, welcome back to 2020.
Thank you, Neil. Great to be back.
Well, Stu, Christmas is coming, and it seems to be coming quickly.
Yes, it's not far away now. It comes quicker and quicker every year.
For you, Christmas, a family time, also as an evangelist, a time when you take opportunity here to reinforce some important things about Christmas, because at Christmas time, people are perhaps more open to the gospel than any other time in the year.
I would say so, yeah. I think we have a unique window as Christians to be able to share with people that we maybe wouldn't have throughout the year. If someone's a little bit resistant to the gospel, at Christmas time they may be a little bit more open just because you're on the topic of the season. Yeah.
And of course, people are in their own bubble too, aren't they? And it depends for some people on which radio station they're listening into. Some radio stations, you'll never hear a Christmas song about Jesus.
Yes.
There are all sorts of other Christmas songs, but it depends on who you're listening to, what movies you watch, as to whether or not there is Jesus as part of the whole equation.
Absolutely. And with all the wrong depictions of Christmas, Santa and all the tinsel and the glitz of commercialism that happens at Christmas time, Jesus can be very lost or non-existent for a lot of people. But this is our opportunity as Christians to be able to wish people a Merry Christmas and ask them the question, do you know what Christmas is all about? Or engage that conversation.
And at a time when it is broadly across the community recognised as a time of goodwill, even the non-Christian, non-Jesus type person is thinking of goodwill at Christmas time. Somehow or other for the Christian believer, Stu, you've got to be able to get past some of the fears that we hold about sharing our faith.
Absolutely, and I think if there was ever a time that was easier to share your faith, it's at Christmas time because of that goodwill factor. You've got people are cheerful, more cheerful. They're like, this whole thing of love and goodwill towards your fellow man. People, for some reason, this time of the year, even if they're not religious, they don't know anything about Jesus, they still have that perspective and a different persona, perhaps, than they normally would have.
When you think Christmas, Stu Millar, what is it that never changes for you? And does this depend on the sort of traditions you might have in your own family or the traditions that your church has? What is it that never changes?
I think the opportunity to share the gospel never changes. A real evangelist answer, wasn't it?
Yeah, I expected you to say something like that.
Oh, look, I think, for a lot of people, it's a time for, getting together with your family and, you're going to be smashed by ads on TV, buy this, and gifts and there's a lot of things that don't change about Christmas, but I think we can interject into that world for someone who doesn't have any Christian, Jesus and their Christ and their Christmas. We can actually interject and actually creatively utilize the fact that people have got goodwill and engage a conversation with people. I think asking some questions, people, and trying to engage that conversation is easier at this time of the year.
Okay, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty here. How do you transition from Santa, elves, presents, and alcohol to Jesus, the greatest gift ever given?
Well, I think there's a number of ways that you can do that. We have a Christmas tract, for example, and you can get that from our website, traintoproclaim.com, or contact me directly and I can send you some. I've got a challenge with my family to give out 100 of those. I've got 4 kids, and so the whole family, as we're traveling around, let's see if we can give out 100 of these. And they're very easy to give out because you say, hey, Merry Christmas. Here's something for you. And people will take it. They don't know what it is. It's got Merry Christmas on the front, and away you go, and then they can have a read about it. So that's one idea that you can use. Another idea is engaging in the conversation. When someone says Merry Christmas, you say, oh, Merry Christmas. Hey, can I ask you a question? Sure. What's that? Do you know what Christmas is all about? And then start a conversation with someone. Third idea, you can use the G7 app. We've talked about this on the show many, many times. It's a fantastic way to present the gospel. You can get the G7 app or Gospel in 7 app from the App Store. It's available for Android and for Apple devices. But it talks about Christmas as a part of the gospel presentation, and so it links in with the season, and you can even use it as an introduction and say, hey, I can show you in 5 minutes a summary of the Bible and what Christmas is actually really about, and that's a great link.
And I imagine that while there's all sorts of Christian organisations that have their own campaigns, you can link in with them because you've got all sorts of different ways that so many choices. Almost you've got to look pretty hard and be intentional about choosing something because there are lots of resources available.
There's lots of opportunity and lots of resources. I'll give you an example of me linking in with another organisation. So ACL, Australian Christian Lobby, are giving out 1 million Bibles at the moment. And if you become a volunteer with ACL, you can contact the local coordinator and they'll give you an area where you can distribute these Bibles. Now, you don't need to just put it in the letterbox. They're encouraging people to knock on the door and say, hey, I'm a volunteer with ACL, wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas and give you a gift of the Gospel of John. So that's a wonderful way of engaging with people. But what I did, Neil, is I went with an iPad as well, and I gave people Bibles. I said, hey, and while I'm here, entirely up to you, but I can offer you to show you on an app a summary of the message of the entire Bible in 5.5 minutes, and it'll summarize that book that I've just given you. And people are like, oh, okay. Now, the first person I spoke to when I was doing my area, and I had some friends help me with it as well, was a Indian lady, and she had a dot on her forehead. She was obviously Hindu. And I said, oh, where are you from? And she said, oh, I'm from Chennai. And I said, oh, so you speak Tamil? She said, oh, yeah, it's my native language. And so I put the G7, it's in 18 different languages, of course. I put it into Tamil, and I said, I got an app in Tamil. And she's like, what? And so I was able to share the gospel with her in Tamil. Now, her response at the end was she wanted to know more. Now, she's a Hindu, but she wanted to know more about Jesus and Christianity. And so she put her email into the app, got sent a free e-booklet with more information about that. I encouraged her. She said she has a Christian friend, and I encouraged her to talk with a Christian friend more about that. So it was a great conversation at the door. And it was just taking that opportunity. But when you knock on the door and say, Merry Christmas, and we've got a gift for you, it just opens up beautifully, the opportunity to share the gospel. The second man I spoke to spoke Malayalam. And I said, I've got an app in Malayalam. He's like, what? Who has an app in Malayalam? Yeah. So it's great. We're in a very multicultural area. Maybe you are as well. And but great opportunities there with things like Australian Christian Lobby and Train to Proclaim.
And you've got 18 languages
That's right.
on your G7 app.
Yep.
And I know that listeners might be familiar with the 5Fish app too, which is another organisation. And that's the Global Recordings Network,
Yes.
the 5Fish app. They've got 6,500 languages
Yes.
of gospel content. Now, I
Yes.
don't know that they're all about Jesus at Christmas.
That's right.
Some
Yep.
of them will be, though.
Yes,
And
that's
so
right.
when it comes to other ethnicities, other language groups, there is something there for everyone to access. And you've just got to be a little bit intentional about it. And as easy as downloading an app, maybe it's the G7 app, or it could be the 5Fish app, but there'll be something there you can use when you're communicating with people in your neighbourhood and you know that they don't speak the same language you do. Hey, when you're leading into a conversation, let me in on some insights here, Stu. Most people have heard about the baby Jesus at Christmas time, but people don't know why we've got a holiday at Christmas.
That's right.
This is another way you can lead people into a conversation. You use this one quite effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And people have heard of the baby Jesus. They've, sometimes sung Christmas carols about the baby Jesus, and you say, well, why would a baby, mean that we've got a national holiday and it's almost international? So many other countries, celebrate Christmas. What's so significant about this baby, Jesus? So what's so significant about Jesus? Do you know? And I think asking questions is great. And you see Jesus did this. He asked a lot of questions. He told stories. So storytelling and asking questions is great in conversation to be able to communicate and to stimulate people to think and to engage a conversation. Yeah.
And at the same time, when you are intentional about sharing your thoughts, your understanding, maybe your own traditions about Jesus at Christmas, you're not actually foregoing the love and the fun, the festivities that you have in your own home. In fact, you're inviting others to enjoy festivities perhaps in a different and more meaningful way.
Absolutely. And I love the way that you're saying intentional, because I think, we've sort of brought out so many different ways you can do this already today. And, there's many different organizations, many different resources, different apps, there's so many resources. You can do incredible things, but it's just a matter of, do you have the heart? Do you want to reach your community? Do you want to reach your neighbors? Do you want to reach your workmates? Do you want to reach your friends that don't know Jesus? Because if you do, you need to be intentional about that. And I love that word because if we're not intentional, life just goes on and they'll never be reached. And eternity is a long time. We want to make a difference for all of eternity. One of my favorite scriptures, 2 Corinthians 4:18 says, I fix my eyes not on what is seen, but that which is unseen. For that which is seen is temporary, but that which is unseen is eternal. And I think we've only got one opportunity this Christmas time. Let's take it. We've only got one life. Let's use it to share the gospel and make an eternal difference in someone's life.
Well, for the past few years, some have said COVID is keeping me from connecting with my neighbours, from my work colleagues. This might be the year to turn over that new leaf and be intentional about how we share our faith at Christmas time. To connect with Stu Millar, he's the founder of Train to Proclaim, and there's lots of free resources on the Train to Proclaim website. The website is traintoproclaim.com, and that's where you can find a link to that G7 app that Stu is talking about. Traintoproclaim.com. Stu Millar, Merry Christmas to you. Thank you so much for sharing your heart with us again today on 2020.
Merry Christmas, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.